Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to Aussie Fish Keeping. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 7 super peaceful fish that you can get for your aquarium. So I've tried to choose some of the most docile fish that you can get in the aquarium hobby, and all of these fish make the perfect addition to any community aquarium. I've also tried to choose some fish that are super easy to get in the aquarium hobby and really accessible, whether you're a beginner or a experienced keeper. But yeah, I guess without any further ado, let's just jump straight into today's video. So as for the first fish on the list, we have a super common little cleaning fish. We have bristlenose catfish. So bristlenose catfish are actually a type of plecotomys, and they're usually kept in aquariums to help keep the algae levels down. Although, as well as that, they are very peaceful and docile little fish, and they can definitely be kept as a great addition into a community aquarium. So not only do they have a very peaceful temperament themselves, but they can actually withstand quite a beating from other fish. So obviously, being an armored catfish, they are very hardy little fish, and they don't really mind too much if they get a little nip here and there. One thing that is important to remember if you are keeping bristlenose catfish is that you do actually have to actively feed them. So a lot of people do just get bristlenose and throw them in their tank just thinking they can eat off the algae. So obviously they will eat a lot of the algae in your aquarium, although it's definitely vital to feed them something like an algae wafer just to supplement their diet. And obviously you can also feed them things like zucchini and green beans. So these guys are quite hardy, and they can actually withstand quite large fluctuations in different water parameters. So therefore they do make great tank mates for things like African cichlids and even tropical fish. So it is quite beneficial to keep these guys with a heater, although obviously they can do well without one, although I would say it's more optimal to keep them with one. But yeah, I definitely think bristlenose catfish are a super peaceful and docile little fish that you can keep in your community aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a super unique little nanofish. We have killifish. So there is a whole wide variety of different species of killifish that you can get out there. Obviously some do grow quite large, like the golden panchax, although there is other smaller nano variants like clown killifish or Austral orange killifish. So all species of killifish are quite peaceful, although if you are keeping the larger variants, you do want to make sure you aren't keeping them with anything too small that can fit in their mouth, just because they could and may actually eat that fish. But if you are keeping these smaller variants, they can go with a wide variety of different tropical tank mates, and they do definitely make a great little centerpiece fish for your community aquarium. So a lot of variants of killifish are quite hardy, although there are a few that are a little bit fickle when it comes to water parameters. So you do want to keep them in tropical water parameters with a heater if you can. So I believe a lot of killifish actually come from Africa, especially the annual killifish. So annual killifish are a group of killifish that generally live for around a year. So where these guys originate, obviously it doesn't rain too much. So what will happen is the parents will be in a small water body like a puddle, and they will lay their eggs in the mud, which will obviously dry up, although the eggs are quite hardy and they last until the next wet season. Obviously, once it rains again and the puddle fills back up, these eggs will hatch and the life cycle will continue. So therefore, there is a few species that you can get that don't actually live for that long. So if you are looking into getting killifish, I would definitely do a little bit of research before you do get them, just to know what you're getting yourself into. But with that being said, I definitely think killifish are another great little peaceful aquarium fish. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a super popular little beginner fish. We have guppies. So guppies are obviously really beautiful little fish, and they're often kept by beginners. So these guys are super easy fish to care for, and they can definitely go with a lot of different species. So guppies themselves are quite peaceful and docile, although they do have very long colorful fins, so you definitely don't want to keep them with anything that's going to nip at them, just because obviously that will stress the guppies out and they can be a little bit aggressive themselves, or they could obviously die, which obviously is not what you want. So I would definitely just recommend keeping your guppies with other really docile fish. So like I was saying before, guppies are super easy to care for and are super hardy, so they don't need a heater in their aquarium, and they can withstand quite a range of different water parameters. As long as the water doesn't get too hot or dirty, you should find that your guppies thrive quite well, given you are feeding them a nice high protein, nutrient rich diet. So the only thing guppies are really aggressive towards is their own fry. So obviously being a live bearer, they do give birth to really small, fragile live young, which make the perfect meal for an adult guppy. So if you do plan on keeping your guppies in a breeding setup, I would highly recommend keeping them without any tank mates, just because the tank mates can also eat their fry once they are given birth to. And I would also recommend having lots and lots of plants in that aquarium, just because once the guppies are given birth to, like I said before, they are very small and they can easily be preyed upon by other fish, which is why if you have plants in there, they can easily get away and hide until they are big enough to swim out in the open water column. But yeah, I definitely think guppies are another great little peaceful fish that you can get for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a super small little catfish. We have Coridor Catfish. So Coridors are another super popular little beginner fish, and they do make the perfect community aquarium fish. So obviously being a catfish, they do spend a lot of their time around the bottom of your aquarium, which is obviously out of the way of a lot of species of fish. So these guys can be a little bit shy at times, and they'll only really come out a lot at nighttime. Now, in saying that, they will get a lot more comfortable in your aquarium over time once they work out where everything is. But in the beginning, you will find these guys are very shy and they will just try and hide. So these guys are very docile and they don't really show any aggression towards any other fish besides their own. Obviously, around breeding season, the males can get into little spars, although it's nothing too aggressive. So these guys are tropical fish, which means you do want to keep them in a heated aquarium with tropical water parameters. And if you can, it's always great to keep them in a high flow aquarium, just because where they come from in the wild, it is quite fast flowing water. So obviously keeping them in a fast flowing tank is super beneficial and it brings out the natural behaviors in them. So with these guys, I do definitely think it is super important to mix up their diet every now and then and feed them live things such as live blackworms. Obviously, you can also feed them things like Cory wafers or algae wafers, but yeah, I definitely think feeding them frozen and live foods is also super beneficial. So you also want to keep these guys with pretty docile fish, just because they can actually release a toxin into the water if they do get stressed. So if you're keeping them with much larger predatory fish, you may find that these guys do get stressed a lot more often, and obviously their color will be a lot more washed out when they are stressed. And if you do have them in a smaller aquarium, this toxin can obviously build up in the water and it can be fatal, I believe. But as long as you keep these guys with other really docile, peaceful fish, you should find that they make great peaceful fish themselves that you can get for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have a really cool little top-dwelling fish. We have Madaka. So Madaka are a super awesome little cold water fish, and they definitely make great beginner fish, just because they are super peaceful and really easy to care for. So these guys, obviously being a cold water fish, they don't need a heater in their aquarium, and pretty standard sort of tropical water parameters will do for these guys. Obviously they are quite hardy and they will withstand a wide variety of water parameters, but keeping them at a nice stable tropical water parameter will obviously be the best for them. So not only do these guys make great tank fish, but they also make great pond fish, and a lot of the time where they've originated from in Japan, they are kept in ponds, just because the bird's eye view of them is obviously super attractive, and they just make perfect little pond fish as well. So like I was saying before, these guys are more top dwelling fish, which means if you do have super nippy fish that are constantly nipping at their bottom fins, that's obviously going to stress them out a lot and they can jump. So it's obviously best if you keep them with more docile fish if you don't have a lid on your aquarium, although I would highly recommend keeping a lid on your aquarium anyway. But yeah, as long as you're keeping these guys with nice docile fish, they shouldn't get too stressed out at all. And other than that, they are very peaceful themselves and they shouldn't bother any of your other fish in your aquarium. So feeding these guys an insectivore-based diet is obviously best, just because they are a top-dwelling fish. So most of the time in the wild, they will be eating small invertebrates from the water surface. So if you can find some sort of bug-based dry food, I would definitely recommend that. But yeah, I definitely think Madaka are another great little peaceful species that you can get for your aquarium. Moving on to the next fish on our list, we have another super small live bearer. We have endlers. So endlers are obviously really closely related to guppies, and they are pretty much the same fish. Obviously the endlers are a lot smaller, and in my opinion they are a lot more hardy as well. So endlers are, like I just said, very hardy, although it is best to keep them in a heated aquarium, unlike the guppies, which can obviously be kept in any water conditions and they should thrive. So the thing I personally think that sets Endlers apart from Guppies is that Endlers are less prone to diseases from genetics. So because they haven't been as badly line bred as Guppies have, they don't really have any really genetic mutations that affect them too much. Whereas sometimes Guppies will have all sorts of genetic mutations that aren't very good for them at all. But yeah, I just find in the genetics, Endlers are a lot more cleaner. So these guys aren't too fussy when it comes to diet, and as long as you are feeding them a nice nutrient-rich, high-protein diet, obviously they're going to display super nice colors and are going to be really healthy and happy in your aquarium. So being such a small fish, they can get preyed upon by larger species, so obviously you're not going to be keeping them with anything that has a massive mouth that they can fit inside. Although the great thing about Endlers themselves is that they do have a very small mouth, so you can keep them with things like shrimp, just because they do have a small mouth, so they're not going to be eating them or anything. But yeah, I definitely think Endlers are another great little super peaceful and docile aquarium fish. Moving on to the final fish on our list, I just mentioned it before, we have cherry shrimp. So cherry shrimp I find are just super innocent little fish. They don't really try and start fights with any of your other fish, and they're just sort of trying to mind their own business in your aquarium. So they are quite defenseless, which means you don't want to be keeping them with any massive, overpowering predatory fish, just because they will gobble these guys up like a little snack. Now, whether you are keeping these guys with large fish or small fish, I would highly recommend just keeping them in a planted aquarium, just because when they are first born, they do like to seek shelter in plants. So if you do have something like Java moss in there, they can obviously hide in there if they need to, and just to feel more safe. But yeah, a general rule of thumb is that as long as these guys can't fit in the fish's mouth, they should be perfectly fine with them. So that obviously means you can keep them with all sorts of popular tropical aquarium fish like tetras and endlers. Now, one thing I would highly recommend if you are planning on getting these guys is keeping some source of calcium in their water. So something like cuttlebone or dried coral is super beneficial to add to your aquarium if you are keeping these guys. So having nice source of calcium in there just helps when they're molting. It helps them gain a nice strong exoskeleton. But besides that, I do think that they are super easy species to care for, and they also make great little peaceful aquarium fish that you can keep in your tank. But with that being said, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope I helped you guys find a nice little peaceful aquarium fish. If you did enjoy today's video and you haven't already, please make sure to go down and subscribe. And while you're down there, comment your thoughts on today's video. I always love going down and reading them all. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in that next video.